Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast by the Takshashila Institution. We are a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like bringing fresh perspectives to Indian affairs and Indian perspectives to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of All Things Policy. I'm Aishwaria Sonavane, your host for today. I'm a research analyst for Pakistan Studies at the Takshashila Institution. Joining me is Abdul Basit, a senior associate fellow at the S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies in Singapore, where he focuses on extremism and militancy in South Asia. Welcome, Mr. Basit. It's great to have you here.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be on your podcast.
For those tuning in, today's discussion centers on the escalating tensions between Pakistan and the Afghan Taliban, a relationship that has been under strain since the Taliban's takeover of Afghanistan in 2021. To set the stage, I want to begin with the most recent flashpoint. On December 24th last year, Pakistani forces launched airstrikes in Afghanistan's Paktika province near the border with South Waziristan in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. While Pakistan's security officials claimed these strikes targeted TTP camps, the Taliban accused Islamabad of killing civilians, including women and children. Mr. Basit, what do you think are the immediate triggers behind these confrontations, and how are they reflective of deeper structural issues in the AFPAC relations?
So, what triggered these airstrikes is the issue that has been clouding the Taliban-Pakistan or Afghanistan-Pakistan relationship since the Taliban's takeover, which is the presence of TTP in Afghanistan and cross-border attacks of TTP from bordering areas of Afghanistan into Pakistan, including attacks on checkposts, damaging the border fence, and then using the Afghan soil to recruit, plan, and execute attacks in the Pakistani territory. Now, time and again, Pakistan has been talking to the Taliban to relocate these people from border areas to other areas or hand them over to Pakistan or disarm them. Uh, Afghan Taliban, they have, responded with mixed reactions. Officially, they totally deny the presence of TTP on Afghan soil, but behind the scenes, they have shared different proposals to tackle with the TTP issue, except for taking any kinetic action against them, for which the Taliban have their own reasons, such as TTP is a big group, 8 to 10,000 militants. That's a conservative estimate. So they fear that if they take any action against the group, the hardline elements within TTP might gravitate towards ISKP, which is the arch nemesis of the Taliban. And remember, the two core factions which formed ISKP when it officially became a franchise or a so-called wilaya or province of the so-called Islamic State. Those two factions were from Bajod and Orakzai, former TTP factions. And later on, ISKP evolved other Central Asian groups, uh, people, some factions from the Afghan Taliban also joined, and ISKP evolved into a different kind of organization where ex-Pakistani Taliban factions still have a presence, but they do not dominate the organization anyways. So they fear that these TTP hardline elements might find ISKP as the right platform if they take action against TTP. But short of a kinetic actions, the proposal they have, tabled for Pakistan consideration were a peace talks. Peace talks took place twice, and twice they collapsed. The second option was they asked Pakistan to bear the cost of moving TTP away from the border areas. Now, Pakistan, without trusting what they offered, uh, you know, tested it that, let's see how they go about it. And some TTP elements were relocated from bordering areas to other areas of Afghanistan. Some were moved to Ghazni or the northern parts of Afghanistan. But it's a big number, TTP, 8 to 10,000 militants. And if you include their family, the number then rises to 35 to 40,000 and even above that. Moving such a large number of people is not easy. Anyway, so the attacks have continued. That has been a source of constant tensions. And every time there is a bigger attack traced to Afghanistan, then Pakistan responds with airstrikes. Now, whether these airstrikes really killed TTP militants or those who were killed in these airstrikes were women and children is hard to ascertain. But I believe what Pakistan did was because there was no cooperation from the Taliban on the TTP issue, as a measure of last resort, then, and to put Taliban on the alert that if they do not do something about TTP to the satisfaction of Pakistan, then there could be airstrikes in future as well. So what triggered it obviously is continuous attacks on Pakistani soil from Afghanistan and no action from the Taliban on TTP on this issue.
Interesting that you mentioned that the Taliban administration had resumed its efforts to resettle TTP members in Ghazni. Do you think these airstrikes will sort of impede these efforts? And does this suggest a shift in the Taliban's approach to managing Pakistan's concerns?
I think those efforts were the relocation was very limited. It's not that they resumed it and mass TTP militants were being moved from border areas to other areas. It was done as a gesture, but then it discontinued because obviously that effort requires money, and because it Taliban are doing it to satisfy Pakistan. The costs involved are to be paid by Pakistan. So, and Pakistan right now doesn't trust the Taliban for various reasons. And I think that is why that effort of relocation has been on off. So they did it at a limited level to showcase that this is one option which can be exercised. But in your first question, you refer to the structural causes of why is this happening? What are the structural causes? And I think the questions which have or the issues which have haunted Afghanistan-Pakistan relationship over the last 7 decades are still the same. Just because it's the Taliban regime, those issues have not changed. The issue of border recognition or disputed borders, it pretty much remains the same. The issue of, cross-border militancy or interference in each other's country, that issue remains the same. It started in the 70s with Sardar Dawood's regime because he wasn't ready to, recognize, or he disputed the borders. And this is when the Pakistan started hosting anti-Dawood Islamist element, Gulbuddin Hikmatyar, Rabbani, and other factions in Pakistan. Later on, when Soviet Russia intervened, former Soviet Russia intervened, then these groups became the Afghan jihadists or Afghan jihadis. There were 7 factions, Saudis, Americans, and Pakistanis backed them. And then, 90s, with after the civil war, Taliban emerged. So over the years, that policy has been pretty much there. So it is pretty much this. And when the Taliban were uprooted, TTP hosted them, and now Taliban are hosting TTP. So there is the issue of border is pretty much there. The issue of proxy warfare still remains, and then there is issue of mistrust as well. Taliban do not trust Pakistan. Uh, Pakistan also doesn't trust the Taliban on the TTP question, especially on the question of border. The issue of refugees is still there. Pakistan has used refugees the issue of refugees to put more pressure on the Taliban on the TTP question. So all of these issues are there. Border fencing is something that the Taliban, they have a serious reservations on them, because not only they do not recognize the border, but the border fencing they see as an effort to divide the Pashtun tribes. So all these issues are on the table. What TTP has done is TTP has only sharpened these issues, and TTP has become the face of all these structural problems which have been there between Afghanistan and Pakistan for the last 4 decades. And just because the Taliban regime is now sitting in Kabul, they are dealing with it. What surprises the world is that under the Taliban regime, the oversimplistic assumption included in Islamabad and Rawalpindi was, with the Taliban returning to power, all these structural issues will vanish because Taliban will listen to what Pakistan will say. But that hasn't happened. Uh, Neither on the TTP issue nor on the border issue. The Taliban have only been consistently pursuing the line what the previous Afghan regimes and governments have been doing. The only difference is if those governments were US handpicked regimes, or before that they were communist ruling Afghanistan, Taliban are Islamist, but their take on the border issue, their take on the refugee problem, their take on Pakistan's, uh, dominant attitude towards Afghans, they don't accept it. Yeah.
Given the volatility and the sporadic nature of these clashes, how does this violence affect the broader regional security, particularly in terms of India's perception of the evolving Afghanistan Pakistan dynamic?
Uh, I think first part of your question, I think this issue is it becomes regional in a sense that if Afghanistan Pakistan relationships are volatile, borders are hot, unstable, it hinders regional economic integration, opportunities for trade, uh, especially transit trade between Afghanistan and India through Pakistan. It definitely, if Afghanistan is harboring TTP, Al Qaeda still, resides in Afghanistan, despite the fact that operationally it's not very active. It's quite weak. It is just surviving. There are families which are just, under the Taliban's, call it protection or house arrest. They're not doing much. Taliban are making sure that they live, but they don't become active, so they don't pose any threat to the international community. But Al Qaeda is still there, and as long as it is there, the Al Qaeda will always be seen as a risk, no matter what the Taliban do and no matter how ineffective and weak Al Qaeda is. Islamic State of Khorasan is there, which is a regional and international threat to peace and security. So relationships between Afghanistan and Pakistan, remaining tense, and with these groups still residing in Afghanistan, there will be anxieties in among the regional states, including India, because it definitely affects the strategic calculation of various regional states, and India is the largest South Asian state. So, to that extent, yes, regional security is impacted if and Afghanistan-Pakistan border is porous and a very long border, more than 2,000 kilometers. So if that, not all of it is affected by Pakistan-Afghanistan tensions, but definitely a large portion of it is. So to that extent, yes, there will be anxieties. Now, how India views from the Indian perspective, I think, I'm not in a position to answer that, but just, trying to view it, I think A, that it, Afghanistan Pakistan tensions open a window for India to engage with the Taliban at a deeper level. They will be less, tense about how Taliban are going to approach the India-Pakistan question. I think Taliban have showed that neutrality soon after they assumed power. And now the Afghanistan-Pakistan tensions will further provide an opportunity to India to continue engaging with the Taliban. So I think at one side, the border tensions will create some anxiety in India, because if these non-state actors were still able to use Afghan soil against Pakistan, tomorrow they could, and there are groups like the Islamic State of Khorasan, Al Qaeda in the Indian subcontinent, which is closely allied to TTP as well, and harbor ambitions against India. These groups could use the Afghan soil against India as well, right? So at that end, there will be anxiety, there will be security concern. On the other, as on at the diplomatic level, these tensions will allow India to get closer to Kabul.
I want to bring in other regional powers like China and Russia. Do you think these countries would play a role in mediating between the Taliban and Pakistan? And what role can these powers realistically play in diffusing tensions? Uh, and what are their strategic interests in stabilizing Afghanistan Pakistan ties?
So Russia and China formed the anti-Western bloc post US withdrawal from Afghanistan. They formed the anti-Western bloc, you know, which included Iran, and Pakistan is part of it as well. The other Central Asian states have also been part of it, because Russia especially viewed US presence in Afghanistan, as US sitting in their strategic backyard. So the withdrawal, and they always viewed it as a threat to their security. So the US withdrawal has been viewed as a big relief and a victory in a way. And they thought that, they made Afghanistan as America's Vietnam. And it's also kind of a revenge of what happened in the late 1980s. Anyways, so they formed the anti-Western bloc, and so what they viewed Afghanistan under the Taliban regime, minus Pakistan, because Pakistan views it differently. I'll come to Pakistan. Views the current Afghanistan state as a security challenge because of TTP. But these countries, they have their security concern, but largely they saw this as an economic opportunity. China and Russia and Central Asian states, minus Tajikistan, they saw this as an economic opportunity, because a lot of mega projects, uh, energy projects, were stalled because of volatility, instability in Afghanistan. TAPI, CASA 2000, these projects were stalled. And China is the largest investor right now in Afghanistan, investing in energy, investing in mineral extractions. If I'm correct, they're also investing in the telecom sector. So China is investing in Afghanistan. Those are not large sums, but I'm just highlighting some of these investments, small scale investments right now, to just to establish that they view this as an economic opportunity. Now, what role they can play, I think China has been mediating between Kabul and Afghanistan, because Baloch separatists and their attacks against Chinese interests and projects in Pakistan have raised concerns. The attacks in KP, there have been two suicide attacks against Chinese engineers in KP traced to some TTP elements. So, what China has done is one delegation took Pakistani concerns to Afghanistan. They tried meeting with the spiritual leader Akhundzada last year, but he refused to meet the Chinese officials. So China has been trying for sure. But then again, as an answer to your first question, what I said, those hurdles or challenges or limitations remain the same. That even if China comes in to help, what is it that the Taliban are ready to do? They cannot take a kinetic action. what they can do is A, relocate, B, disarm. So, what is possible? And a lot of it then has to do that what is the Pakistani buy in into that. So, I think what these states can do, they can only help to reduce tensions to an extent. Beyond that, if terrorist attacks in Pakistan continue, Pakistan, if they become intolerable, Pakistan will respond with airstrikes going forward. And then there is not much that these, states can do. And what these states are also doing is they are pragmatic in a sense that since TTP doesn't pose a threat to them, and their investment and their interest are aligned with you know staying neutral, so beyond a point they are not going to take the Pakistani side totally and become anti-Taliban or something. They're not going to do that. So what they can do is they can facilitate a dialogue to dial down tensions, but they cannot resolve structural issues which have haunted Afghanistan Pakistan ties over the last 4 decades. And then at the end of the day, it is up to Afghans, the Taliban, and Pakistan to decide how they want to address the issues that confront or haunt their relationship.
Back in 2010, ex Afghan President Hamid Karzai had once said that Afghanistan and Pakistan are like conjoined twins. So, in light of the current hostilities, how do you think what measures can both sides take to sort of initiate a trust building process or build on what is already uh, the diplomatic ties between the two countries?
Yeah, so what he said is correct, but what he did not allude, so they are like cousins, right? But they are like angry cousins. So they're twins, but angry twins who are fighting all the time for right and wrong reasons. So I think right now tensions are quite high. They're unlikely to subside, but what they can do is, I think, A, have a realistic assessment of how they are dealing with the problem, because there or the challenges, because Pakistan see TTP as a threat. Afghan Taliban do not have that view, number one. Number two is TTP is a terrorist organization for Pakistan. For the Afghan Taliban, they are jihadi brothers, right? So these views do not meet anywhere, and then the Pakistan border is internationally recognized. For the Taliban, it's British colonial imposition. So where is the meeting point? How do you find a middle ground? So I think what they can do is, a, start talking about these issues at one point. B, I think to dial down the tensions, start with less contentious areas where they can cooperate. Now, one view could be, well, that is like ignoring the elephant in the room, which is the TTP. But then you have to start somewhere, start building trust. So I think the areas where they can cooperate is A, economy, border trade, because for a lot of people living across the porous and very long Afghanistan Pakistan border, cross border trade is the lifeline. So I think using border closures to disrupt trade as a weapon to penalize or to show anger towards the other side has hurt the local economy, has hurt local traders, transporters, other tribesmen who depend on cross border trade. So I think they can identify that as one area where they can cooperate, and no matter what happens, cross border trade should continue. So economy is one area where they can you know engage each other and maybe come to a consensus that, irrespective of intractable security challenges, this is one area where cooperation will continue, and trade will not be weaponized and politicized for security challenges. The other area I think where both countries can cooperate and which can be a low hanging fruit is environmental challenges, which goes by the way for the whole of South Asia. The way India and Pakistan are struggling, but particularly the Punjab province in Lahore and across in Delhi, the issue of smog. Uh, Afghanistan-Pakistan can, identify that as another area where they can cooperate and start building trust. And I think China is keen to spread the BRI framework from Pakistan to Afghanistan as well. So there are some projects such as there is a railway line coming from Uzbekistan going through Afghanistan and it will, touch Pakistan. Such projects should be prioritized and they can help to build trust. And if they do not help in resolving the intractable security challenges, at least they will bring down the temperature where a conducive environment is formed to look for pragmatic answers. And because, Afghanistan is a landlocked country and no state or government has diplomatically recognized them, they are dependent on, goodwill of other countries to continue their trade. So if border trade is prioritized and they see the fruits of border trade by not weaponizing it or not politicizing it for security challenges, uh, Taliban will be able to see, in my opinion, they will be able to see merits of moving TTP away or relocating TTP elements away from border to allow trade to continue. Because what disrupts border trade is TTP's presence in those border areas. So if border trade is prioritized and both countries do not allow security challenges to disrupt that, resulting in border skirmishes, border closures, uh, you know, uh, breaking the border fence, if that doesn't happen, then I think Taliban, after a while, will see the fruits of it and the merits of moving TTP away from the border areas. And I think then a conducive environment, and if that results in reducing the number of cross-border attacks, then some CBMs could be achieved. Paving the way for a broader dialogue between the two countries. But I want to caveat this with one more take, which is TTP's presence in Pakistan is well established. So, only assuming that all of the TTP attacks are only coming from Afghanistan will be a reductionist approach or oversimplifying a complicated problem. So, a lot of what is going on in Pakistan is because TTP has a very strong network inside Pakistan as well. A portion of it is in Afghanistan, enjoys Taliban's patronage, and continue to operate with impunity, yes. But to assume that if this happens and TTP is relocated, and if tomorrow Pakistan and Taliban come to some understanding on TTP, the problem is going to go away. No, that is not going to happen. So Pakistan has to find an answer to the problem within its borders, and then the portion of it is which is outside its border in Afghan areas. So a combination of it is what is going to address the challenge. But yeah, to answer your question, I think environment, border trade, regional diplomacy is are some areas, people to people contact. I think these areas should not suffer because of the security challenges, and if they continue to engage, they will see these are low hanging fruits, which could, then create a conducive environment for a dialogue between the two countries on security as well.
Thank you, Mr. Basit. These insights were extremely valuable for a crucial region. like Pakistan and Afghanistan. Thank you for taking the time out to speak to Takshashila Institution.
If you liked our show, dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs. Check us out at our Twitter handle at Takshashila INST or our website takshashila.org.in.